please come up to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Craig Lipset. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As was mentioned, I focus my work on clinical trials and drug development, the development of new medicines, including generating evidence of efficacy and safety. I thought it was appropriate to start this presentation with this image of an empty wheelchair. When you see an empty wheelchair, you might think of one of two things, and they are, for many, the inevitable outcome for neurodegenerative diseases, or maybe the hope and promise of new biotechnology and new medical discoveries. Because for many neurodegenerative conditions, including many rare conditions we'll speak about in a few moments, their hope is all pinned to innovations such as artificial intelligence that we'll be discussing. Because there's really, today, for so many, only one way out of that wheelchair, and that's at the end of their life. But for so many today, thanks to gene therapy and other new biotechnology breakthroughs, there is now emerging another option. I thought I would start this presentation with an image. Our next speaker hails from Paris, so you can correct me if the Siege of Avignon, I believe, is in the south of France. This is an image that's depicting a moat around the castle. The reason that I've chosen this as an image to get our conversation started is because for so many in pharmaceutical and biotechnology industries, there has long been a moat. And we'll discuss what powers that moat, what has enabled that moat for this industry for so long. But for our conversation today, I want us to think about one of three options for what artificial intelligence will bring to this industry and to this moat. Is artificial intelligence going to reinforce the walls around the castle and make them even more impenetrable to competition? Will artificial intelligence make the operations inside the castle smarter and better and increasingly efficient? Or will artificial intelligence start to disintegrate that moat? And if you can notice from this picture, you can see the direction that I'm going to head for this conversation. Because in this picture, we see how moats were penetrated with innovation over time, whether by building up stacks of branches and trees to try to build up towers outside of the castle walls. Well, let's have this conversation now and see which way you think at the end. As we think about artificial intelligence then, I'll give you two what-if questions to get us started. What if AI is a catalyst for a new ecosystem of medicine developers? What if the new models fill the gaps for neglected and rare diseases, as well as in precision medicine? And so we're going to have this conversation about the impact of AI and biotechnology today, but we're also going to start to point to some potential futures that AI enables in terms of disruption in this industry overall. Okay, so let's jump in. For folks in the room today, how many of you work in or are familiar with biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry? Is this new for many in this room? When we think about a biotechnology company or pharmaceutical company, there are really four things that these companies do and differentiate themselves around. One is the research, what happens at the bench, the basic science around medicine discovery. The second is around development. How do we run clinical trials that test our new medicines in humans, many for the first time, and help us first to understand their safety, and second, to understand their efficacy, what works and in which patients. These organizations also have expertise in areas such as commercialization, understanding how to bring those molecules through to the market, introduce them to providers, help to educate healthcare providers and ensure reimbursement and coverage, as well as expertise around manufacturing. These are the breadcrumbs of the moat. what has made pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies so capital intensive and so hard to replicate. The moat is powered by two things. As we mentioned, it's powered by capital, because these processes that we're describing are incredibly expensive and capital intensive today. They're also powering the moat through expertise, specialized knowledge that these organizations hold. Well, let's dig in a little bit now around AI as a use case in the life sciences, pharmaceutical, and biotechnology companies. And in each of these four domains, there are many different examples that we can point to that are emerging for how AI is bringing disruption and opportunity. As we think about research, I think it was Professor Horrocks earlier this afternoon who mentioned initiatives like AlphaFold and the ability in the research space for AI technologies like AlphaFold to be able to disrupt the discovery process. AlphaFold is innovative, both as an AI-powered engine that can predict protein folding and drug-drug interactions and other implications when two molecules interact for the first time, including a molecule that hasn't even been synthesized yet. But it's also very innovative in terms of its openness and how accessible this is as a technology that is not locked up within one pharmaceutical company, but so widely available and accessible across so many, whether in academic groups or private companies. It kind of speaks to the perspective from our mayor of Pohang earlier this afternoon, reflecting on open Pohang and the ability to leverage openness and sharing of data. In the drug development space, a headline that I chose here is around the future of drug trials, including virtual AI patients. In this example, we're looking at how artificial intelligence can help us to create digital twins, not of a machine or of a race car, but of myself. And how might I have a digital twin that is constructed using vast amounts of my real-world data, the data that I create in my healthcare encounters, the data I create by wearing a watch like the one I'm wearing that's collecting biometric data, and a range of other data that might be collected through connected devices or other systems around me. And how will AI allow this digital twin to help support a range of use cases to improve clinical trials, starting with our ability to design and plan better studies by using these digital twins, but all the way through to the hope and the promise of running synthetic clinical trials, our ability to run studies without human patients involved, our ability to run these virtual trials that are enrolling not me, but my digital twin as a study participant. We're already seeing strong regulatory support in Europe, in the US, and in other markets around some of these very creative use cases. And as our models improve, so too will regulatory confidence in their use. These models are really powered by two types of data. Data about me, where I'm sharing data about myself to help us to have baseline of who I am as a digital twin, and data about we, the collective data about other patients with my health condition to enable the models to better track and predict the trajectory of my disease if I were, say, a control in the study, where I'm not receiving a new drug, but just the existing course of therapy. We have examples around commercialization and use of AI. And the headline that I chose here, Veradigm uses AI to expose hidden real-world patterns in GLP-1 treatments. In this case, many life sciences companies are using vast amounts of data, real-world data and real-world evidence from electronic health records and other data sources to try to better understand and predict physician prescribing behaviors. Why are some patients being treated with one therapeutic and not another? Why are some patients more compliant or adherent to the therapy over time? whereas others might be at risk of dropping out? And how might using AI with those vast amounts of data help us to better ensure that the right patients are receiving the right new therapy? And the example that I chose for manufacturing using AI takes us right back to digital twins. And in this case, not a digital twin about me as a person, but a digital twin of a system or a process, such as those used in our manufacturing of molecules, whether small molecules or large biologics. AI digital twin developed to boost pharma manufacturing efficiency. Using digital twins in the manufacturing process is hardly new, but with increasing data and stronger models, our ability to improve quality and efficiency in the manufacturing process is only going to get better. I'm going to do a deeper dive with a handful of other use cases in one of those 4 areas. We talked about research, development, commercial, and manufacturing. I'm going to speak for a few moments about the second of those 4, clinical trials and drug development. Choosing this because it turns out it is the most expensive of those processes and the most time-consuming of those processes. Clinical trials and the life cycle of creating a new medicine can be anywhere from 50, 60% of the overall spend. They also tend to be a multi-year process that can easily take 8, 10, 12 years to navigate. And so it's a great space for us to think about implications for AI to improve the process. And improving that process may start right up front with how we can better design and plan our clinical trials, maybe by running simulations to test protocols using those synthetic patients we talked about earlier, or testing our eligibility criteria in the places that we want to go to, the countries to run those studies. AI might be a source for improvement around patient recruitment and enrollment. Patient recruitment tends to be the leading source of delays when we're running these studies. It's hard to find and enroll these patients in these studies. But the patients exist. They're known to healthcare. They already have a diagnosis, which means for many, the answers might exist in our electronic medical record system. And how can we use AI to help us to better match complex trials to patients with complex medical histories? Can we better predict which patients might be at risk of dropping out of the study, to be more thoughtful with different interventions we might look to introduce? AI implications for data collection and reporting are certainly very significant today. While I was in Seoul this week, I had the opportunity to visit a number of medical centers in the city. There are clinical trials units to be able to tour and spend time with the staff that are leading clinical trials in the city. And still today, so much of the work is involving paper for data capture. Still today, there is so much opportunity for us to increase the efficiency of how we're conducting our studies by better connecting electronic health records to our study databases. But the challenge for so many can be solved with AI, whether it's around natural language processing to help us with free text and other unstructured data that may exist in those medical records. Increasingly in our studies, we're looking at newer data sources, including connected devices and wearables, devices that are collecting more consistent, more frequent sampling of physiologic data, whether movement or other types of biometrics. And how do we start to consume and integrate that data as well into our clinical trials? And finally, how can AI help us to better improve the quality and oversight of patient safety in our studies, enable us to better monitor for where there may be errors or safety risks that are emerging? There's so much data that's collected in near real time in these studies. The opportunity for agents or other tools to be able to layer on top of that data in real time and enable faster interventions if there are quality issues or safety signals. Well, from this conversation so far, there are now a couple of opportunities clearly starting to emerge. AI might be a great pathway for us to be smarter in how we're running our studies. Maybe the great opportunity with AI is to help us to improve the speed and efficiency of our studies. If I think back to the castle and pharma and biotech companies having a castle with a moat around it, maybe it means we're going to run things better inside of that castle. But what we're already seeing is how AI enables the democratization of the tools that support biotechnology, that the knowledge and the technologies that are required for discovery, development, commercialization, they're now accessible to many more types of organizations. A consequence of that is that the cost of drug development can and will now come down. Okay, so let's go back to that story of the moat. The moat was powered because this whole system of developing a new medicine is very expensive and it required very specialized expertise and tools and technologies. But now we're seeing a consequence of AI might be that the cost of drug development has come down. And clearly, as we've been talking about much of the day, the tools and knowledge associated with specialized processes becomes much more open, much more accessible, much more democratized. How does this together start to lower the barrier for others to become biotechnology or pharmaceutical development organizations, to become biotechnology companies themselves? What types of stakeholders might that include? What if government agencies were motivated to develop and launch their own medicines, perhaps in indications that they find particularly challenging because of the economics of treating their populations with existing treatment options? Perhaps universities will move beyond today's model, which has largely been to discover in their labs, but often then license those molecules out to pharmaceutical companies. Maybe they shouldn't in that future. Maybe this future actually enables them to hold on to that molecule and develop it themselves. Why would they need a pharmaceutical company if the knowledge, the technology, and the cost has now been so democratized? Another stakeholder that I'm personally very invested in are nonprofit patient organizations, especially in rare diseases. We're going to talk more about a few examples there in just a moment, and why I believe that this story of AI lowering the barrier for what it takes to become a biotech or pharmaceutical company is going to be particularly exciting in the near term in rare diseases. But for those in the investor market that are wondering about the consequences, I think we'll also start to see the emergence of low-cap, lean drug developers. That today we talk about maybe smaller market or smaller mid-sized biotech companies, but most of them are still being capitalized based on the legacy approaches, requiring extreme amounts of capital to develop a medicine and bring it into the clinic. Can this democratization now create markets that didn't exist before for much more lean, capital-efficient organizations to be drug developers? My belief is that the place where we will see the near-term impact of this democratization will be in rare diseases. I was just at a meeting last week with a group called Global Genes. They actually are now counting that there are just over 10,000 rare diseases that have been identified. And yet only a fraction, less than 5% of these, have a medicine that's approved, at least in the United States, by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. This is frequently despite the availability of science and evidence for pathways that could prove to produce a new treatment option. In most cases, traditional biopharmaceutical companies can only prioritize and develop those molecules for which there is a clear return on the investment for their investors. These are investor-driven organizations. And so Because of this paradigm, where so many rare diseases have been neglected and left behind, we've seen the emergence of nonprofit, patient-led organizations working together with universities and partners to bridge that chasm. We see parents who maybe yesterday were a lawyer or a musician, but because their child was born with a particular mutation, in many cases a spontaneous mutation, these parents are becoming drug hunters and drug developers, raising enough capital, partnering with academic groups to develop gene therapies, to develop ASOs, antisense oligonucleotides, for their kids, to repurpose small molecules that may already exist and use artificial intelligence to try to identify existing molecules that could be therapeutic options for their children. These parents and these organizations have a level of urgency that's unmatched. No academic group, no investor-driven company will be as motivated as a group of parents. And so they have stepped in to bridge a gap. When they've done this work to date, it's been with the hope that if they could de-risk the science, that then pharmaceutical companies may step in and pick up that molecule and continue to invest in its development. But again, because the numbers don't add up, the markets are too small. And quite honestly, in many cases, if a for-profit driven company did try to enter that market, the cost for the treatment option would be so much that it would be untenable to society to pay for. As these tools for research and development become democratized, the opportunities for who can become a biotechnology organization now become unlocked. I'll share two examples with you. On the left side of the screen, meet David Feigenbaum. David Feigenbaum was a college athlete, a football player in college. He went on to medical school, and it was during his time in medical school that he was diagnosed with Castleman's disease. Castleman's disease left David wasting away in a hospital bed. Without visible or known treatment options for his very rare condition, he went from a high-performing college athlete to a fraction of his weight and size, struggling for options. He and his medical school classmates started to dig through the literature looking for different options. One option that they and their care team found was to repurpose an existing drug that was approved for a different indication. We have lots of medicines that are commercially available in Korea, the US, Europe, and markets around the world. But they're all approved for one or some very specific diseases. In David's experience, they were able to find that one of those existing drugs was actually also a treatment option for his very rare disease, Castleman's. And it worked. And David's been in remission now for years. Finished medical school. He was on the faculty at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia back in the United States. But David has also now launched EveryCure, a nonprofit initiative for which he has raised over $100 million to build an AI-powered drug repurposing machine, to build an AI engine that can consume the universe of approved drugs and the data attached to it and try to match them against the universe of rare and other medical conditions that are lacking good treatment options, and to objectively assign matching scores for which may be promising to generate additional evidence through various clinical studies. On the other side of the screen is Sunita Malapati with her daughter. Sunita was a lawyer in Washington, D.C. when her daughter was born, teaching, practicing, but her daughter was born with a very rare mutation in something called CACNA1A. Some of these diseases are so rare they don't really have names. We just call them by the location of the mutation involved, in this case, CACNA1A. Sunita helped to found a nonprofit, the CACNA1A Foundation, and began a journey to prioritize and isolate a treatment option for her daughter. Journeys like Sunita's and other parents like her have led to multiple molecules that are now ready for clinical trials. These molecules are owned by the foundations, by the nonprofits, powered by these parents. But one thing Sunita then came to appreciate was that for so many of these diseases, even if they have good data and they've de-risked a molecule, there's too many. And pharmaceutical and biotech companies can't generate enough return to take those indications seriously. And so Sunita then started the Buffalo Initiative, a nonprofit effort that initially has been backed by the Chan Zuckerberg Institute. And working together, they're developing a fund and a research platform to move these patient-led molecules into the clinic as a nonprofit. And so think about that. We'll have phase 1 studies that may be sponsored by Roche or Sanofi or Pfizer, but we'll also have phase 1 studies that are sponsored by nonprofit groups of parents. And it's all powered because the knowledge and the tools for this process are so accessible today. As we're thinking about these futures then, and we're thinking about investing our time, our knowledge, our capital, it gives us a few different options from this conversation. For some, we might say, I'd like to invest in the titans, the existing biopharmaceutical companies, whether large cap pharmaceutical or mid-sized biotechnology companies. They will run better and smarter, powered by AI, whether in their research, their development, their commercialization, their manufacturing. AI will make these organizations more efficient. More efficient use of capital might mean for some that they're able to move more molecules through their portfolio, deliver more new medicines for patients globally. For some in this room, the option that fits best may be to invest in the picks and the shovels, to invest in the platforms, the tools, or the underlying data that's required to power these models. In many cases, there are entrepreneurs that are developing very use case specific technology platforms using AI. And so while we have horizontal platforms that may help us to use agentic AI or conversational AI or other use cases at an enterprise level, other entrepreneurs are digging in around specific operational challenges and developing and validating investable solutions that can help us with AI for improving the quality of data in a clinical trial, or how we can map and pull data from electronic health records into study databases better. I, for one, am particularly optimistic, though, about our ability to invest in the pioneers. That as these models continue to democratize knowledge, democratize and make more accessible the tools, lower the cost of drug development, we'll see new entrants that couldn't have participated before. And some may be supported by philanthropy, like nonprofit organizations. Some may be spinouts from universities, and some may be new types of companies that are far less capital intensive than what biotech has looked like before. And those all become very interesting next generation investment opportunities. Discovery, development, commercialization, manufacturing, these are the walls that have defined traditional biotechnology, and they're coming down. With AI, the moat that has isolated this industry and made it hard for others to enter is coming down, and the frontier is now wide open. The next generation of biotechnology is not necessarily about who is the bigger pharma, but it's going to be about who has the wider community developing new treatment options for all. Now, earlier this week, I think today, the 12th, so just 3 days ago, Eli Lilly, the US-based pharmaceutical giant, made an announcement that I think helped to validate a lot of the presentation that we've been talking about today. Maybe they saw my slides. Maybe I uploaded it to an open AI platform. What we saw from Lilly just announced this week was something called TuneLab. And what Eli Lilly has announced is that the AI models that they have developed that have been being used by their scientists and researchers, they're now opening up for researchers from other companies and institutions. They're opening up the AI tool set that they've developed and trained with their data from over the years, data that Eli Lilly values at $1 billion investment because of the investment in research studies across disease areas over the years. Lilly active in oncology and rare disease and metabolic health. The algorithms that they developed off of that data, they're now opening and making available. Eli Lilly is taking the position in many ways here that they see the moat coming down as well. And rather than just deal with the consequences, what if they differentiate and take a leadership position in bringing down that moat? In this case, the advantage back to Lilly, they'll be a much better partner for new biotech companies that may want to look to work together with Lilly in the future. But they will also diversify and open up the range of data that is now available to train and optimize those models, which to date have been trained based on Lilly's studies, but now will also be trained based on the studies of all of these other biotech companies that they're opening up access for. So that certainly serves Lilly, but it certainly helps to improve the ecosystem for so many others. I'm happy to stay connected. QR code will take you to ways to stay connected together. And otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you very much for your time. Kamsahamnida.